think that if there was one animal that I personally would not want to come across in the wild, it would be a grizzly bear, or any kind of bear, really. You know, I know that, like, sharks and crocodiles, you know, maybe they're objectively more terrifying just because you're in the water. But, look, something about bears really gets me. I mean, maybe it's because they're also adorable. I don't know. That could be it. But anyway, welcome to Man Eaters. This is a podcast. It's a true crime podcast, but all the murderers are animals. That's the best way, I think, to describe what this show is. My name's James, and of course, we talk about man-eating animals, animal attacks, and basically any situation where animals and humans come into combat with each other. We are talking about a very well-known animal attack today, and a very well-known man-eating bear. This is the story of the Grizzly Man. Now, this was made into a very well-received documentary in the early 2000s by Werner Herzog, I believe in 2005. I'll get a little bit more into who this person was, but this documentary includes hours of footage that this person shot himself. This person was a person who spent years and years and years with bears and dedicated their life to their protection. So yeah, let's just jump straight into the story today. This is Timothy Treadwell, aka the Grizzly Man, and his fatal encounter with a bear known as Bear 141. So yeah, enjoy the story. Timothy William Dexter was born in 1957 in Long Island, New York. His father was a foreman for construction sites owned by a phone company, and he was one of 5 children who lived in relative comfort in middle American suburbia. A B-grade student, Timothy was well-liked and personable, and got along well with adults and children alike. He shared an affinity for animals with his mother, and he kept a pet squirrel named Willie, which his mother claimed was his best friend as a child. In high school, he enjoyed swimming and became the captain of the school's dive team. He received a scholarship for diving, but soon injured his back and lost that scholarship. He moved back home and became depressed. His parents said he was searching for a new start. He started smoking weed and hanging out with people that his parents didn't approve of. Around 1977, at the age of about 20, he moved to California to become an actor. He got an agent, changed his last name to Treadwell, and auditioned for several well-known TV shows. He won a part on an episode of The Love Connection and was screen tested for the role of Woody Boyd in Cheers. The role eventually went to Woody Harrelson, but allegedly, Timothy was second in line. Losing this role caused him to spiral. His father and his friends said that it almost destroyed him. Soon after this time, he had a near-fatal heroin overdose, and the doctors prescribed him with antidepressants. Timothy refused to take them as he said it numbed his enjoyment of his life. Friends and colleagues said that Timothy was so desperate to create a new identity for himself, he started telling people he was actually an orphan from Australia, although, according to one close friend, his accent was more like a Kennedy than an Australian. After discussing his plans for the future and his love for wildlife, a friend recommended he travel to Alaska to watch the bears. After his first encounter with a wild grizzly bear, he wrote that he had found his calling in life, and that his destiny was now entwined with the bears. He was right. Treadwell studied the bears during the summer seasons for 13 years between 1990 and 2003. Treadwell broke his visits to Alaska into 2 parts. In the early months of each season, he camped on the Big Green, an open area in Hallow Bay in the Katmai Coast. He called the area the Grizzly Sanctuary. During the latter part of each summer, he would move to Kaflia Bay and camp in an area of especially thick bush he called the Grizzly Maze. Here, the chances of crossing paths with wild bears was much higher, since the location intersected with bear trails. Treadwell was well known for getting extremely close to the bears he observed, sometimes even touching them and playing with bear cubs. He habitually named the bears he encountered and consistently saw many of the same bears each summer, so he claimed to build a strong standing relationship with them. Timothy was repeatedly warned by the Park Service against his behaviour with the bears. Tom Smith, a research ecologist with the Alaskan Science Center, said that Treadwell was breaking every park rule there was in terms of distance to the bears, harassing wildlife, and interfering with natural processes. Right off the bat, his personal mission was at odds with the Park Service. As Timothy's career progressed, he became more and more paranoid and hostile of the park service and people in general. Treadwell often claimed to be alone with the wildlife on several occasions in his videos. However, his girlfriend, Amy Huguenard, was with them during parts of the last 3 summers and at the time of their deaths. By 2001, Treadwell had gained notoriety and was something of a celebrity. He visited schools to talk to students about his experiences with bears, and he appeared on several high-profile television programs, including the Discovery Channel, Late Night with David Letterman, and Dateline NBC to discuss his adventures. He also co-wrote Among Grizzlies, Living with Wild Bears in Alaska with Jewel Palovic, his co-worker who he lived with for 20 years. This book describes Treadwell's adventures on the Alaskan Peninsula. Treadwell and Palovic founded Grizzly People, an organization devoted to protecting bears and preserving their wilderness habitats. In October 2003, Treadwell and his girlfriend Amy, a physician's assistant, visited Katmai National Park. Treadwell and Huguenard's diaries indicated that she was afraid of the bears and was vocal about leaving the expedition early. Treadwell set his campsite near a salmon stream where wild bears commonly feed in the autumn. Treadwell was in the park later in the year than normal, at a time where bears attempt to gain as much fat as possible before the winter. Food was scarce that autumn, causing the bears to be even more aggressive than usual. Treadwell and Huguenard were to leave the park at his usual time of year, and had actually returned to Kodiak on September 26 to store their gear for the season and to catch a connecting flight back to their home in California. However, after an argument with the airline ticketer over the price of altering his return ticket, Treadwell and Amy made the decision to return to their campsite on September 29th for an additional week. The bears he had been used to during the summer had already gone into hibernation, and more aggressive bears that Treadwell did not know from other parts of the park were moving into the area. Some of the last footage taken by Treadwell, hours before his death, includes a video of a bear diving into the river repeatedly for a piece of dead salmon. This is a sign of food desperation in brown bears. Treadwell mentioned in the footage that he did not feel entirely comfortable around that particular bear. In the documentary Grizzly Man, Werner Herzog speculates on whether Treadwell filmed the very bear that killed and ate him. Around noon on Sunday, October 5th, 2003, Treadwell spoke with an associate in Malibu, California by sat phone. Treadwell mentioned no problems with any bears. The next day, October 6th, Willie Fulton, a Kodiak air taxi pilot, arrived at Treadwell and Huguenard's campsite to pick them up, but found the area abandoned, except for a bear, and contacted the local park rangers. The couple's mangled remains were discovered quickly upon investigation. Treadwell's disfigured head, partial spinal cord, and right forearm and hand with his watch still on and ticking away were recovered a short distance from the camp. Amy's partial remains were found next to the torn and collapsed tents, partially buried in a mound of twigs and dirt. A large male bear, tagged and previously designated as Bear 141, protected the campsite and was killed by park rangers during their attempt to retrieve the bodies. A second adolescent bear was also killed a short time later when it charged at park rangers. An on-site post-mortem of Bear 141 revealed human body parts such as fingers and limbs. The younger bear was consumed by other animals before it could be examined. A video camera recovered at the site proved to have been operating during the attack, but police say that the 6-minute tape contained only the voices and cries as a brown bear mauled Treadwell to death. The tape begins with Treadwell yelling that he's being attacked. "Come out here, I'm being killed out here," he screams to Amy. That the tape contained only sounds led the troopers to believe the attack might have happened while the camera was stuffed in a duffel bag or during the night. In Grizzly Man, Werner Herzog claims that the lens cap of the camera was left on, suggesting that Treadwell and Huguenard were in the process of setting up for another video sequence when the attack happened. This, however, was enough time to record the bear's initial attack on Treadwell and his agonized screams, its retreat after Huguenard tells Treadwell to play dead and when she attacked it with a frying pan, and its return to carry Treadwell off into the forest. Charlie Russell, a bear expert, worked with Treadwell. Russell advised Treadwell to carry pepper spray and use electric fences. He initially refrained from commenting on Treadwell after he was killed, but after Grizzly Man was released, he wrote a lengthy critique of Treadwell's failure to follow basic safety precautions. In spite of his criticism of Treadwell, Russell praised him for his devotion to bears and his ability to remain alive for so long. He defended him against the people who criticized his work, writing, "If Timothy had spent those 13 years killing bears and guiding others to do the same, eventually being killed by one, he would have been remembered in Alaska with great admiration. According to the organization Treadwell founded, Grizzly People, 5 bears were poached in the year following his death, while none had been poached while he was present in Katmai National Park. Some of his ashes were spread at his last known campsite by his friends, co-workers, and pilot. The following is a clip from the Grizzly Man documentary that Treadwell recorded years before his death. Knowing the context in which it's played now, it seems like it's almost a chilling prediction.
And that these bears can bite, they can kill. And if I am weak, I go down. I love them with all my heart. I will protect them. I will die for them. But I will not die at their claws and paws. I will fight. I will be strong. I'll be one of them. I will be the master. Still a kind warrior. Love you, Rowdy.
There you have it, guys. That's the story of Timothy Treadwell, aka the Grizzly Man, who came to a almost appropriate grisly ending. I had a lot of feelings when researching this story. I watched the documentary, which, by the way, you should absolutely watch. It goes into way more depth than I possibly could in this format. It's an absolutely amazing documentary. It's all on YouTube. You can watch it for free. It's just called Grizzly Man, directed by Werner Herzog, who I can't listen to without reminding me of like him wanting to see the baby in The Mandalorian. Yeah, so this guy Timothy Treadwell, right? He's a very complicated person. He clearly loved what he did. He clearly respected the bears, but I think that he respected them almost too much, right? Like he respected them to a point where he didn't respect them anymore. In the documentary, they talk to a Native American guy who says, for 7,000 years, there's been this relatively harmonious relationship between people and bears. They stay out of their way, and we stay out of their way. We stay out of their way, and they stay out of our way. Ours meaning people. And then people like Timothy come along and interact with the bears and are friendly with the bears, and this conditions the bears to potentially think that that's what all people are like, And so the next person comes along and a bear gets a bit too friendly and maybe bites them, and then that bear gets shot, and all the bears around it get shot as well because of some weird vindictive hunt that the people go on. So, it's not necessarily a great thing. It's interesting as well that there was a pilot, I think not the pilot that he knew that picked him up, but another pilot that was involved in the cleanup of the remains from the campsite, who essentially said that one of the reasons he thinks he survived for so long with the bears is that he acted so bizarrely for a person that the bears might have just thought there was something wrong with him. He uses a derogatory word, but I'm just going to say mentally challenged. That's potentially what the bears thought Timothy was. Now, I don't know all about that. I think that, to be honest, I think he just got lucky. You watch all this footage of the guy with these bears, and he really seemed to not be in control of the situations at all. Like, at any moment, a bear could turn around and maul him to death. And there were some close calls, too. They, would come up to him and he would, talk them off. And it was almost like they didn't engage just because they were bored by him. But if there was any reason to attack, they would have, and they did, obviously, in the end as well. One thing you note as well is that the longer he stayed out there, the less attached to the human world he became. And he talked many, many times about how he hated human civilization. He was really upset by it, and he becomes more and more disassociated with humanity as he goes on. There are clips of him just going on these weird rants about the park service and how he saved the bears and he beat the park service. The park service wants to get him. There's footage of him spying on other campers in the park and being really paranoid. At one point, a bear approaches this group of campers and they throw rocks at the bear to scare him off, which I think is a really pretty thing to do. And you hear Timothy Treadwell in the background while he's filming, crying and being really upset that happened, which is kind of understandable. But then you also see the campers left him a note, so they obviously knew who he was, probably because he was pretty famous for being there. They left a note on a tree stump that just said, or not a tree stump, on a log that just said, "Hi Timothy, see you next year," which you would think would be pretty friendly. Timothy read that and took it as a threat. Like, he said, these are almost his exact words. It's not a message like, "Hey, we're gonna freaking kill you." It's more creepy than that. And then he also found a rock with a smiley face on it as well, which he took again as a threat. So he kind of became a little bit unhinged. I mean, there's footage of him like following a bear, and after the bear defecates, he just walks up and picks and starts rubbing the poo, and he's so like enthralled that this feces was inside the bear moments ago. It's truly a little bit bizarre. So you know, he wasn't all there. So he obviously was a victim, but he put himself in the situation, and I think that he wouldn't be upset that this happened. Like, he understood what he was doing, I think, and I don't think he would be terribly shocked to learn that this had happened, especially since he had realized, you know, in his last camp that things weren't going well. You know, that he'd returned later in the year than he was used to. The bears that he saw weren't ones that he knew and weren't ones that were acclimated with him. There was a food scarcity going on, so the animals were becoming more and more aggressive and desperate for food. But the one thing that really sort of is really sad for me is that he dragged his girlfriend into it. And this woman, we don't know a lot about her. She's barely in any of the footage. There's 100 hours of footage that they found of Timothy that he took, and she only appears twice. In one shot, it's from really far away, and we don't get to see her face. And in the second one, it's from around the time that she died. There's a bear approaching them, and they're both standing really still, and it's very tense, and you can tell that she's terrified. And again, you don't really get to see her face, so we don't know much about Amy. But it is just sad that she got roped into it, and she ultimately died as well. The footage, well, not footage, the audio tape that was recorded apparently is so horrific that only a couple people have listened to it. So the coroner listened to it, and firstly, he's a bit of a weirdo. If you watch the documentary, maybe you'll know what I think. He seems like a bit of a weirdo. But yeah, like, he listened to it and he describes the screams as really like terrifying. And and then the other person who listened to it was Werner Herzog, the director of the documentary. And we get to watch him listen to it live. We don't hear what it is, but we watch his reaction. And it's crying. And it's really weird to see a man like Werner Herzog, who is absolutely terrifying, crying, you know. And he takes the tape and he says to, I think it was Jewel, I can't remember her last name off the top of my head, but the woman who he worked with for 20 years. And he says, "You should not listen to this. Don't listen to this. I think you should destroy the tape. If you live with it in your house, it'll eat at you. Don't ever listen to this." And apparently she never has. There are some clips on YouTube that claim to be the audio clip. They sound horrific. There's no way to verify if they are real. Some of the comments say yes, it's real. Some say no, it's not. One of the clips that I listened to did seem to be accurate, at least to what people describe it to be. Like, some of the lines that the coroner said were in it pop up again. But again, it could be a fake or a recreation. Either way, it's horrific, and I actually was planning on putting it into the podcast today, but I decided against it. It's a little bit too messed up. So anyway, that's the story of the Grizzly Man and Bear 141. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. It was a really interesting one to research, and the fact that there's a full documentary about it made it much more enjoyable. So definitely go and check that out if you feel inclined to. It's on YouTube. And if you enjoyed this, let me know. Please follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcast, because that's the only way for me to know if you like it and I should do more. I'm planning on doing another 8 episodes in this first season and reassessing there. So I'm having a great time so far. So let me know what you think, and I will be back in a week with another episode about another man-eater. So yes, tell your friends, share it around, have a great week, and stay safe out there. if you're in lockdown like I am, you're probably not going camping, but if you are, bring some bear spray. Even if you don't live in a country with bears, I'm bringing bear spray from now on, because that absolutely terrifies me. Those cuddly, cute, terrifying bastards. Bye, everybody.